welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am your host, Taylor Rockwell. No Daryl Grove with me in studio today. He is on his way back from Florida, so he should be here tomorrow. Until then, I've got Luke Moore of the Football Ramble podcast, On the Continent podcast, many other podcasts and productions. He's a busy, busy fella. Luke has been on the show, I'm going to say many times over the years, but it's been a while since last we had him on. So I called him up to discuss podcasting as a whole, the kind of expansion that they've done, and how they've continued to put out such a quality show for so many years. But then we look at the Premier League, what's happened so far this season, what might happen at the end of the season, some moves that Luke thinks could work, some moves that have already happened that he's a little questionable of. We obviously talk Christian Pulisic because we're legally obligated to as an American soccer podcast. We then take a look at some of the competitions in Europe, specifically the kind of stories and narratives that have been most interesting to Luke this season. So it's lots of great topics. Luke is always very funny, very engaging, and very cursing on occasion. You'll know when you hear the bleeps. Not surprisingly, those bleeps coincide with our brief conversation about Brexit, so you've got that to look forward to as well. So I will stop with the introductions and instead turn it over to the charming Englishness that is Luke Moore. Joining me on the other end of the Atlantic Ocean, I've got Mr. Luke Moore. I usually do introductions based on what the person is up to. So, Luke, I'm wondering, should you be Luke Moore of the Football Ramble, Luke Moore of On the Continent, just Luke Moore, man about town? What would you prefer?
I don't mind. You can call me whatever you like. Yeah, the Football Ramble, On the Continent. My podcast network is Radio Stakhanov, Stakhanov. So you can check that out as well. But ultimately, Taylor, just call me a friend of the Total Soccer Show. That's what I care about.
That's some outstanding plugging right there. Since you are based in London, I wanted to start here. I sort of think of you all like you all, Football Weekly, and like the Totally Football Show as rival street gangs. So I do wonder, is there tension because you guys are all within like one? I mean, I know London's pretty big, but like how do you all get along in a sort of crowded space?
Well, I worked with Max of Football Weekly and James of Totally, both separately within the last month. So we do other stuff. So I do Talk Sport, which is a big national sports radio station here in the UK, and Max fills in sometimes when the regular presenter isn't around. So I work with Max semi-regularly, and I know James through James Horncastle, who's on the continent, and I saw him at Premier League Productions, which is a TV production company over here, about a week ago. So it's all very friendly, really.
All right.
They just need to understand that we are the most independent and the most badass, and as long as they get that, that's cool.
That's good.
We're like a Wu-Tang clan, right? We're Wu-Tang, right?
Is that
ain't nothing to with?
All right, we're off to a strong start. Does that include?
Can I swear on this?
Ideally not, but do what you do.
You're going to be in that post-edit sleeping all the way through to the rest of the afternoon.
Pretty much. Thanks for that, Luke. Thanks for that.
No worries.
But I do still. So you mentioned Max. You mentioned James. You didn't mention Barry Glendenning, who I think I caught listening to On the Continent on the last episode. How what's the crossover there? And would you fight Barry Glendenning? Is my question.
I like Barry. I've had a beer with him a few times. Good guy. He works very closely with Max, of course. I bumped into him about, I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 months ago. There's no beef.
All right.
I'm going to fight him. Yeah, I'll fight anyone. I don't care.
There we go, Luke. Now he's getting punchy. Yeah. I like it. Yeah, I guess
I don't have any particular reason to fight Barry. Barry's a good man to have a beer with, so he's probably someone you want to keep on side, really.
All right. Well, but it did sound like you were instigating a little bit on the latest episode of On the Continent. Were you trying to make people angry?
What did I say?
Was it the pineapple pizza one? I feel like I saw you. I listened to that episode and I saw you tweet out. I think you were actively trying to annoy. Was it James Horncastle?
Yeah, that's to annoy James Horncastle.
There you go.
Because he the world revolves around Italy and Italian culture with James, and I actually find it quite pompous. So I like to throw little curveball questions out there at him just to see if he'll flat back them away or whether he'll get quite annoyed. And yeah, I generally succeed because I know James pretty well, so I know what makes him tick.
There you go. And for those who are unaware, can you tell us a little bit about On the Continent, how you all decided to start doing it, and how you all assembled the crew that you've got going there?
Yeah, sure. So on the Football Ramble, we used to do a little European section at the end of the show sometimes if something of note came about. But after a while, I just thought that was doing the whole continent a bit of a disservice. And I've been friends with Andy Brassel and James Horncastle for a while, and I've always wanted to work with them. So the summer before last, got them together and said, look, do you want to do a European football show with us? I know that James was doing a European football show on the TV, but that got canned, and so he had the appetite and a bit of time to do some more stuff. They were keen to do it, so now every Wednesday we sort of run the rule over the big stories in Europe. And on a Saturday, we have this show called The Mailbag, where we answer everyone's questions about European football. And we do stuff, make it a little bit more accessible for people. So I can understand if you're a football fan or, you're an American listener, a soccer fan, there's a lot of soccer to listen to and to watch and to get your head around. So what we try and do is we try and sort of, praising it and get it a little bit more manageable. And then we do things on the Wednesday show, like telling people that there's 2 games worth watching this weekend. If you could only watch 2 of these, would be the 2 we'd recommend. And we just try to sort of break it down and make it a bit easier for people and cut through all the noise and try and give people the salient points of what's happening in Europe, basically.
And I know you're a Pompey fan, but are there certain teams in Europe that you find yourself pulling for whatever reason? Not necessarily maybe are a fan of, but just teams that you maybe find yourself supporting more than you thought you would?
Yeah, I mean, what we try and do over at Radio Stakhanov, which runs the Ramble and On the Continent, a load of other shows as well, we try and do a weekend away in Europe every season. Last season we went to Naples and we watched the Napoli game, and it was when they went very close to winning the title. And that was a brilliant day because they were 1-0 down with like a minute left and they managed to come back and win 2-1. And the celebrations were amazing. And Naples is an amazing city. So I would say Napoli, yeah.
All right, and then has that translated to Chelsea nowadays? Are you following Mauricio Sarri there?
I'm following him, yeah. But I wouldn't say I've got any particular affinity for Chelsea, although I was at Stamford Bridge a couple of weeks ago for the Newcastle game.
Actually, since we've found our way there, let's stick with Chelsea for a minute. So Higuain has arrived at Chelsea. I'm wondering how you think he'll do there and what maybe his arrival spells for Olivier Giroud.
I think he's an elite striker. I think he's at a very, very top level. And he's worked successfully with Sarri in the past. So that's a reason to be encouraged for Chelsea fans and for the team. Although I do think that coming in January, at the age he is, having never played in the Premier League before, which is a really competitive league, I think he's going to find it a challenge. And I saw him play on, Sunday night or whenever it was. They played in the Cup, and he played pretty much the whole game. And he obviously looks willing, and he looks like he can make a good run. He's a very intelligent forward. But he's going to find it hard. The pressure's going to be on him because they're desperate to get into the Champions League again and all that other stuff. What does it mean for Giroud? I think Giroud is a player who's hugely undervalued at Chelsea at the moment and doesn't start games. And when he does start games, they look a better team. I think it's important to view Olivier Giroud at this stage of his career in the round, and you don't need to worry as much about how many goals he's scoring personally. You need to worry about how much better the team are with him in it. And he gives them a focal point. He does for Chelsea exactly what he did for France in the World Cup. I mean, France, of course, emerged victorious at the World Cup, but they started it slowly, and they didn't have a system that seemed to be working until Deschamps changed it and put Giroud up there as a focal point for players to play off him. He's very, very good at that. I can see him moving on, actually. I can see him moving on to another Premier League team and still offering a hell of a lot, because at the age he is, he still looks pretty good. He still looks pretty fresh. And I do genuinely think he's got a lot to offer, and you need to see beyond the goal scoring stats, which actually across his career are pretty decent anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I tried to get Daryl's a Wolves fan. I tried to get Daryl on board for Giroud to Wolves, but he wasn't having it. But I do feel like I
think that'd be a nice move for him.
Yeah,
I can see him going to Wolves. I can see him going to work with Pellegrini at West Ham, perhaps.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
I don't see why he'd want to leave London. He didn't want to leave London before. Mm-hmm. I imagine he still wants to stay in London. So Wolves isn't that far away. You know, it's a bit of a trek, but it's not a ridiculous one. And of course, West Ham is just down the road. So I wouldn't be surprised if he went somewhere else and he did well. I said about a week and a half ago that I thought he might go to West Ham, and it got picked up by a paper over here.
Oh no!
And I got sort of derided, and people were saying that'll never happen. But look, I still think there's a chance. I think there'll be a will there for all parties. It's not going to figure for Sarri. And if they're going to hire a manager like Sarri and stick with him long term, which they seem to say they are, and they've got to back him in this particular style of football he plays, and they've got to back him in getting rid of the players that aren't going to fit into his system.
Who do you think, with that in mind, who do you think are the ones that they need to get rid of? Who do you think definitely aren't fitting into the system?
Well, there's just certain players who aren't going to get anywhere in the team. So he's not going to pick Gary Cahill. He doesn't want Gary Cahill in his defence. He wants to play forward to back, and Cahill isn't going to fit in a two centre back there, so he's not going to play. Danny Drinkwater, who cost him about 30 million quid in midfield, is used to playing as a two in midfield. And they play a three in midfield, and Jorginho's always going to start, so he's not going to play, so he'll be moved on. Giroud doesn't fit in. So there's three for you straight away that they're going to probably move on if they can find someone to take them and they can do a deal with wages, because the wages will be very high for all three of those players.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Gary Cahill doesn't move before the end of the month. I think the Giroud deal is a bit more difficult, and I think I think Drinkwater, he's going to I think unfairly, but probably struggle to find a club that's going to pay him anywhere near what he's on at the moment. So, but you have to understand that Sarri is a manager who plays a certain type of football, and if the players don't fit, they're not going to stay. And for example, he's already playing Hazard as a false nine out of position, and I think Hazard will probably leave as well, but that's for different reasons. And he's already playing Conte alongside Jorginho in a sort of shuttling position, which is nowhere near his strengths. So there's a lot of growing pains happening at Chelsea at the moment, and if they back the manager, there's going to be a lot more changes.
Well, they've backed him in the sense that they brought in another player, Christian Pulisic. I'm wondering, for non-Americans, for you, Luke, ignore for a second that this is an American podcast. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Christian Pulisic and that signing at Chelsea, because obviously for me, a U.S. fan, it's exciting, but I kind of can't remove my Americanness from that equation.
No, I do think it's exciting, and I do think he's a great player. I think he's got potential to be the real deal. I know his agent. I know he wanted to play in England for a while. I didn't think it would happen quite this early. I didn't think it would happen at Chelsea either, because I think he grew up a Man United fan, didn't he? And so
yeah, I think I've heard that.
Yeah, so I thought there were reasons why he could have gone to a lot of the other big clubs in England. So Man United fan. Liverpool, obviously, because he would fit in well there, and there's a Dortmund connection there with Klopp and some of the staff. Arsenal, up until very recently, had Sven Mislintat in charge of their recruitment, who was, of course, in charge of recruitment at Dortmund, so I thought there was a link there as well. Mislintat's moved on now, of course, but for him to rock up at Chelsea was a surprise. But, of course, he's found himself having limited game time because Jadon Sancho has gone over there from Man City and is sort of setting the world on fire. And they've sort of usurped Christian as the sort of the wonder kid in situ. So I do think he's got a lot to offer. I think he's going to improve, and I really like the character of him. That's the key thing here. The reason he's on the radar of top Premier League clubs and why he's gone to Chelsea is obviously because he's a talented boy, but also because of his attitude. I mean, he seems a very well-rounded, mature kid. Obviously wants to work really hard, and it's a step up for him, I think. Not in terms of the Chelsea, Robert Club and Dortmund, but just because the Premier League is fierce every single week, and he's going to find it a lot more difficult at Chelsea because they're not a team who have traditionally given young players a chance. So whereas he's come from probably the best club in the world for a young player, he's now going to arguably one of the worst. So there's a lot of challenges ahead for him, but I'm excited about him. And let me tell you, everyone over here is excited about him as well. It's not just because you guys are American and you want something to hold on to. Premier League fans are excited for him to start as well.
And flipping that around, though, what's the excitement level for a player like Jadon Sancho? Because I'm always curious, if a player moves away from the Premier League, if there aren't as many English eyes upon him, does the enthusiasm level go down, or are like general, kind of generic football fans over there excited to see what happens with Jadon Sancho next? Yeah,
but the answer to that question is just simply that it depends what he does. I mean, if he goes over to Dortmund, as he has done, and just doesn't get in the team, very, very quickly he's going to be forgotten about because there's plenty of players here to get excited about and plenty of football to be played. So the fact that he's gone into the team, forced his way in, has contributed in numbers and performances, and has now been called up by the full England team and looked pretty exciting doing it, means that people are very happy, very excited. And there's a lot of sort of enthusiasm generally now. There was a big sort of mood shift in the summer in England about the English national team, partly because Southgate's team did so well, relatively speaking, in the World Cup, but also because their youth teams have started winning tournaments. under 17s, under 19s, under 20s. These teams are all the age group teams we've got coming through are, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I don't want to overstate it because I know English football fans have got a reputation for this, but I can't tell you the last time we had so many exciting age group teams and young players coming through. Now, if they get a pass to their first teams and play first team football at the top level, England are going to be a real force for many years to come. So, Jadon Sancho is very much a part of that.
More from Luke and I in just a second, but first, more from me, because I wanted to let you know about today's sponsor of the Total Soccer Show, Hims. Hims is a new wellness brand for men. It's a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. And let's focus on that last issue, shall we? Because over 25% of new erectile dysfunction cases are men under 40, which means that sexual performance issues are more common than you think. But the problem remains that while the issues may be common, it still feels like dealing with them and the solutions to them are a little bit uncomfortable. They're a little bit taboo. That's why you tend to see those like gas station supplements or snake oil pills, because people maybe don't want to go to a doctor and deal with the awkwardness. That's where Hims comes into play. Hims connects you with real doctors and medical grade solutions to treat ED. That means no waiting room, no awkward in-person visits, no lines. You don't have to kind of check in and then tell the receptionist why you're there, because who really wants to do that? Products are shipped directly to your door, which makes it easy, fast, and discreet. And again, it's worth noting that Hims isn't just about erectile dysfunction. They've also got solutions for hair loss and skincare. So if you're interested, you can try a month today for just $5. Hims will get you started for just $5 while supplies last. See their website for full details. This would cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or pharmacy, but you can go to forhims.com/totalsoccered. That's forhims.com/totalsoccer, all one word, all lowercase, and then ED, uppercase, all together. Forhims.com/totalsoccered. A link will be in the show notes. Thank you very much to Hims for sponsoring today's episode. Now back to my conversation with Luke Moore. Well, since you've made it like optimistic and happy, I'm going to make it a bummer because I'm wondering if you've taken a look at all, like Sancho, for example, able to move to the continent at a young age because, the UK part of the European Union at that point. Have you looked into what will happen if Brexit goes through, if everything happens as it seems like it will? What will happen to those young players? Will those opportunities still be there, or will it be that much more of a hurdle?
Well, it will be more of a hurdle. The detail of what's going to happen is unclear. It's very sketchy. No one really here knows, as far as I know. I wouldn't be a politics expert, but no one really knows the detail of what's going to happen. I know that there's a bit of lobbying. In fact, quite a lot of lobbying from the Premier League to the Home Office to try and sort out exceptions to these visa requirements that will change after the UK leaves the European Union. So for players coming in, I think the Home Office want them to change the amount of homegrown players they need to have in each squad, and they're going to come to some sort of compromise so that, I don't know if it'll be wavered, but there'll be a slight change. In terms of players going the other way, it will just be a case, I imagine, of European clubs trying to secure visas for these players, which I don't necessarily think needs to be a huge problem in real terms. I mean, I think at best it could just become a paper exercise. Mm. But the situation is a bit stark because the opportunity, not just in football, but for young people and old people all over the UK to go and live and work wherever they want in Europe, pretty much, what is and was an amazing opportunity, and that's now going to be removed, or at the very least, it's going to be a lot harder to do. And I think that's a real shame. I think it's a tragedy, and I for one passionately hope it doesn't happen, but it looks like unfortunately it is going to happen. So, look, do I think that we're going to see a return to the 70s where there's hardly any European players in England? No, I don't think that. But there are going to be some growing pains and some changes, and at the very least, on an admin level, it's going to be different.
And actually, sorry, I know we're trying to stay away from politics since neither one of us is a politics expert, but I did want to ask, what is the latest there? So you just said you hope it doesn't happen, but it looks like it will. I saw on The Guardian today Theresa May looking stressed out, but in front of members of Parliament. So it does seem like it's going to happen then for sure.
Well, yeah, what's happening is, as far as I understand it, we're due to come out of the European Union on the 29th of March. Obviously, that's rapidly approaching, and no one here has been able to sort their shit out. So they're now tabling amendments to the Brexit bill to work out how they can make this happen. And there's different options, like maybe delay it for a while. Some people are lobbying for another vote, a people's vote on the terms of the withdrawal. all that kind of stuff. I mean, some people want to sort of crash out with no deal, which then other people are saying will be a disaster for the economy, and then we'll have trouble, imports and exports and all that kind of stuff. So it's all up in the air, mate. There's not really been an awful lot of what I would call tangible progress since the vote itself. So it's going to come down to the wire, and your guess is as good as mine about what would happen.
All right. Well, then,
I just have no idea.
Well, then let's go back to this. You mentioned crashing out of things. I'd say it's fair to say Jose Mourinho crashed out at Manchester United. We'll go there. We haven't talked since he left. Were you surprised by the way things ended with Jose Mourinho at Manchester United?
No.
All right, next question. Were you surprised by how successfully Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has started?
Yeah, to an extent. I think the first 5 or 6 games, possibly the first 5 games, including that cup game against Reading, I think it were very, very winnable games.
Yeah.
And so it probably was enough for him to come in, give everyone a bit of a lift. Everyone understands that he knows the tradition of the club and that he's written his own place in the folklore of it. So I imagine for the first 5-6 weeks, it was probably enough for him just to not be Jose Mourinho. And then there came the second phase, which I publicly said I doubted whether he could achieve at a high level, where he has to show that he's got a few tricks up his sleeve, bring the players along with him, and win some tough games as well. And to be fair, they've done that. I mean, they've beaten Spurs in the league. They've a bit lucky in that game, perhaps, but they won it. And then, of course, they've beaten Arsenal in the cup away from home. And tactically, he was spot on. He was brilliant. And the changes he made as well from the bench were also very, very good. So he's won 8 games in a row. It's realistic he could win his first 11 in a row, which I don't think has ever been done before. I think he's equalled the record at United for a new manager, I think. I'm a bit sketchy on those stats. But if he wins 11 in a row, I mean, for sure, that'll be the best from a new manager that I can remember. So he's given himself a real chance of taking this job long term. And I think he's given the board at United a real decision to make. So whatever United get out of this season, if he can sort of somehow force his way into the top 4, get them 4th, and win the FA Cup or something, I think that'd be very brave not to give him the job.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, because it does feel like they sort of appointed him intentionally as he'll make everybody happy, people have fond memories, and then we'll figure it out from there, and still don't have the director of football and everything like that. And then suddenly he's doing what he's doing, and it feels like maybe they've stumbled into success, but not success they necessarily wanted. So it does feel like any other manager, it would be like, oh yeah, give him the job right away. But because of the way things have gone there lately, I'm with you that it seems like he'll still have to perform to make that happen. If he doesn't perform, do you think that they're still going to be looking at Mauricio Pochettino? Do you think he stays with Tottenham, or do you think he's maybe looking towards Spain as his next employment opportunity?
I don't know, really. To answer that from a Man United point of view, I mean, the structure they've got above the manager at that club at the moment is shameful. I mean, it's not befitting of a club of their size, and I think a lot of changes need to be made at an administration level. I don't know what Pochettino's thinking. I'm fairly confident. I mean, I go to Spurs a lot. I'm going there on Saturday for the Newcastle game. I think he's desperate to manage them in the new stadium. I think that's something they will look forward to for some time, and I think he's probably keen to see how that affects the club and how much money's freed up. But I also think there's an element to Pochettino where he loves having a reputation of doing what he does on really limited resources, and that just further sort of feeds into his myth and feeds into his legend. So, the reality is, I suppose, that for people listening who aren't massively au fait with the sort of intricacies of the size of clubs and stuff, Spurs are a better team than United at the moment, but Man United are a much bigger club, and as are Real Madrid, of course. And when you move from Spurs to Man United or Spurs to Real Madrid in the current state that these respective clubs are in, no amount of excuses is going to get you away from not winning things. And I don't necessarily think Pochettino's record at Spurs needs to be measured in trophies because of what he's done there. I mean, he's essentially revolutionised the whole club at a really difficult, pivotal time for them, and he deserves a huge amount of credit for that. But in terms of expectation, regardless of what's happened at United over the last 5 or 6 years, overall, the expectation at United and Real Madrid is different, and that's an adjustment for him, and that'll be what you'd argue would be the summit, the apex of his management career, and then we'll see what he can do, because ultimately he's a manager of an amazing reputation, and to a large extent rightly so, but he's never won anything at all. And that's the question, I guess, is whether he can make that step or whether he thinks he can achieve that at Spurs. So I guess it just depends what his outlook is.
Actually, you mentioned an interesting point there with like the ownership, front office issues, management issues at Manchester United, not the most like well-run of clubs. Flipping that around, like if you were looking for like a stable club in England, who do you think is the most like well-run Premier League club out there right now?
It's a good question. Spurs wouldn't be far away.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
They're a serious concern. I mean, the club's run the right way. They don't chuck back, good money after bad. They've got a plan. They're seeing that plan through. There's difficulty, with the fact that they do find themselves short of playing personnel at the moment. But then Pochettino likes to work with a small squad, and so do a lot of managers, so I understand that. And they're moving into this new stadium, which has been delayed because it's one of the biggest construction projects in Europe. And it's going to be, I think, the most advanced sports stadium anywhere in the world. So, of course, there's going to be growing pains on that. But to answer that question in short, I don't think Spurs would be far short of that.
And then for you as like an England fan, when Harry Kane gets injured, do you wear an armband or flags at half mast? Like, how do you approach Harry Kane being injured?
Well, it's part of the course because he gets injured with this exact injury at a certain point every season.
Yep.
So, and then he comes back earlier than people expect, and he does really well again. So, it's a bit like a familiar old sweater.
Okay, so you're not lighting candles; you're just putting on the sweater. Okay, cool.
No, because England are in the semi-final of the Nations League, which happens in at the end of the season. So he'll be well back before then. From an England point of view, I'm pretty enthusiastic. I'm pretty optimistic for the first time in a long time, given that I actually run a podcast which was essentially started on its mutual, disappointment in the national team. Yeah. I feel like we've come a long way since those days.
Was that the Steve McLaren failure to qualify era?
Yes.
Oh, that's a fun time to start a show.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I know. Yeah. Well, why not? Can't get much worse than that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's probably a lot of American podcasts popping up these days in like the last year or so in response to how things have gone here. So, yeah, I guess trauma creates podcasts. That's a lesson learned.
Yeah.
And maybe like the trauma within the roster for Tottenham will get them to a strong finish to the season if Pochettino figures things out. As you said, he thrives on that sort of challenge. How do you think the rest of the season plays out for the teams at the top, for Liverpool and Man City?
Well,
if you could predict the entire rest of the season, no big deal. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you can hold me to this, and if I get it right, you can bring me back on.
Right.
And if I get it wrong, I won't answer the phone.
All right, that's fair.
I think that there are questions that Liverpool need to answer, which are and the main one is can they get through the rest of the season without becoming too emotionally involved with what they're doing? Now, they haven't won the league in the Premier League era. They've come pretty close, but they've not been able to do it. And this is a club that, more than any other, has been desperate to win a league title. Obviously, they had stalwarts like Steven Gerrard, Jerry Carragher, all the other guys who came close but never did it. Of course, they won the Champions League, and that was amazing, and that's a huge achievement as well. But they want to win the league. I mean, this is in the top two biggest teams in clubs in the country, and rightly so for what they've achieved and because of the size of their fan base and all that kind of stuff. So they're desperate for it. The question is, are they too desperate for it? The question is, do they make the right decisions at the key moments in the stretch when they've got Man City breathing down their neck, or perhaps even a little bit ahead of them? And with Man City, I guess the question for them is, they've already won the league. They won it last season. Can they maintain the intensity? Sir Alex Ferguson in his first book talks about how much more difficult it is to defend the title because you've got a certain part of your squad which will just internally relax and not have that intensity and not have that desire because they've already achieved what they set out to achieve. So it depends who manages those two situations the best. And so I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if Man City were to do it. That's how I feel at the moment.
Do you feel like there's even though they're trying to repeat and they've got all the money, they've got Guardiola, do you feel like there's less pressure on Man City? I can't say why, and this is coming from like again, an American perspective, not being in England every week for games, but it just seems like maybe because City, like historically, were behind United a little bit, so they don't have, in my mind, like such a rabid global following at the moment, the way say Liverpool do, and the way like Anfield with the Cop, with You'll Never Walk Alone and everything. It just feels like there's so much intensity and emotion there. Can that?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that can almost switch around, and it can be like there's kind of maybe less global attention on Man City, so there's less pressure, versus with Liverpool, with all the narrative you suggested, that maybe that does weigh on them a little bit more, like as the season plays out?
Well, I think that the narrative around Liverpool has been that they've put that pressure on themselves for a long time because they've not won the league title for a while. I don't know if anyone puts Pep Guardiola under more pressure than he does himself, but this is a team who want to measure themselves on winning European titles, and that's something they've never done. So that's what their focus is, I expect. If they were to prioritise, I imagine they'd prioritise that. But the thing with this exact point we're having this conversation, the last time Liverpool played, they beat Crystal Palace 4-3, and it was a crazy game. And I wonder whether the fan base are concerned that is a return to the old "you score 3, we'll score 4" type of mentality, which Liverpool's sort of been known for in recent years, which doesn't win you titles. I mean, it self-evidently doesn't win you titles because defending wins you titles, and they have been defensively absolutely brilliant up until about 3 weeks ago, and that's a worry for them. They need to put that to bed. And hope that's not, basically hope that's an outlier and not a sign of things to come. Because if it's a sign of things to come, Man City will eat them up and they'll win. It's just as simple as that.
So you've got the injury issues, though, with Liverpool's defence that are obviously, or I would say, playing a big part in why they're suddenly conceding 3 goals. Do you think they need to strengthen this window, or do you think it's about like playing youngsters until more veteran players get fit?
It's just, you know what, it's just the luck of the draw. I can't see them bringing in a 50, 60 million pound defender in January. That's not going to happen. So
Again,
they've got a situation
you mean.
now where, they've obviously paid £75 million for Van Dijk, and he looks the best defender in the world.
Yeah.
So that speaks for itself. But sometimes it really just is the luck of the draw. You've got a couple of players like Alexander-Arnold, who's been great. He's now injured. Joe Gomez has been injured, who can also play fullback. They find themselves in a situation where James Milner, who's the auxiliary fullback, is now suspended because he was sent off in the last game. So they are struggling a little bit defensively. But every team goes through this. West Ham have had a load of injuries. Spurs have got a load of injuries at the moment. This is part of it. And to a large extent, winning the Premier League title is how you best deal with those situations. It might well be that a young player comes through. Look what happened with Marcus Rashford.
True.
In fact, look what happened with Harry Kane. Harry Kane forced his way in because he was given opportunities in the Europa League, and he was playing up front, and he started playing well, and he played so well in the Europa League as a young kid because he was given an opportunity that he forced his way into the main first team, and the rest is history. Those opportunities are really where you rely on your academy, rely on your young players, and rely on their mentality to push you through and make a name for themselves. It might come down to something like that. We've seen a couple of young Liverpool players come through and impress, actually. So they might step up, and that's exactly what Alexander-Arnold did. I don't imagine anyone thought Alexander-Arnold would be this far forward in his development, but now he plays internationally and he's great. So these teams do have large academies and really high-quality coaching at a youth level. And if those players are ready to make the step up, then that could make the difference.
I am not a Liverpool fan, but you have just made me excited for the end of the season and for Liverpool's title run. So well done to you, my friend.
It should be good. It should be good. It should be interesting.
Yeah, I think it will. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I wanted to ask you this. You've been doing On the Continent for the entire season, obviously. Have there been any stories that have been like particularly compelling to you when it comes to like European competitions? Have there been anything that you find yourself that you keep going back to, that you keep keeping an eye on, or just anything that sort of stands out as being particularly head-scratching for you?
Well, listen, there's always really fascinating stuff happening all over Europe. I mean, we had the thing a year or so ago with Sporting of Portugal, based in Lisbon, whose owner got into an awful lot of bother. A load of the players ended up cancelling their contracts and walking out, and a couple of them ended up at Wolves, and that's still rumbling on legally. We have the situation where Thierry Henry has just been fired from Monaco after a few short months in charge.
Can we talk about that for a moment? Because I don't know how up to date you are on it, or how up you are on the events at Monaco, but I am not. But that is the one that I was hoping you would mention, because I am so confused by it. Because they sack Jardim, right, or Jardim, I still don't know how to pronounce it. Jardim, they bring in Henry, they sack Henry, they bring Jardim back. From your understanding, what is happening at Monaco? Why have things gone so south there?
Well, it's a crazy situation. I can't really think of another time this has happened. They brought in Henry, who's a bit of a legend at the club. Started his career there, all the rest of it. They fired Leo Jardim because it simply wasn't working. They had a terrible start to the season. He's been brilliant for them as a coach, but of course that great season they had, where they went quite far in Europe. I think they got to the semi-final or something, and the team was basically just broken up. All these amazing young players were just moved, were just sold. And then Jardim, for a number of reasons, found it difficult. He was eventually, I think he might have quit and said, I can't get any more out of this team. I think that's right. My memory is sketchy on that, but I think he just quit. They brought in Henri, who had flirted with a couple of other jobs. I mean, for those who aren't aware, he was assistant coach to Roberto Martinez at Belgium in the World Cup, and he was offered, I believe he was offered the Aston Villa job, who in England are a really big club, but they're sort of down on their uppers at the moment. They're in the second tier. And he came very close to going to Villa and trying to rescue them and bring them back up to the Premier League. Didn't do that eventually. Fast forward a few months or whatever, and he found himself in the Monaco job. In the Monaco job, he's just looked completely overwhelmed from the start. And it's a situation where I think sentimentality comes into it, and they wanted him to be good, and they wanted to give him all the chances they could to achieve. They wanted him to have money to sign players. They wanted him to have coaches around him who would help him for him to learn on the job. But ultimately, he just looked like a player who was just filling in as a coach, overwhelmed by it, was put on gardening leave initially, suspended, and then he was fired. The next thing that Monaco did is said, we made a huge mistake letting Jardim go. We should never have let him go. He's the best man to take us forward, so we're giving him the job back. In the meantime, Jardim, who had been linked with loads of different jobs, almost got a job in England, I think, might have even been the Chelsea job, I can't remember. But he's back at Monaco now, and the whole thing's been reset and started from scratch again. And the most salient point is this: they're in big trouble, Monaco, and he needs to hit the ground running because they're running out of games, and there's a danger they might be relegated.
Oh, yeah, they are still in the relegation zone, aren't they?
Oh, and if that wasn't enough, I'm pretty sure the owner's been investigated for a lot of financial irregularities.
Yeah, that checks out.
So,
that checks out.
Yeah, so there's loads to be getting excited about when it comes to Monaco. Just ironically, not their performances.
Yeah, I mean that checks out. It is also a good reminder. Like, I know Unai Emery, after the FA Cup loss and like of late, has started getting a little bit more criticism. I would just say this, Arsenal fans, like, look at Thierry Henry, what happened at Monaco. Like, easily could have happened with Arteta if he had been appointed at Arsenal. So I feel like Unai Emery, even though maybe there are some like down moments for Arsenal, overall I feel like just stick with him and that it's going to be fine. At least you're not sacking a manager, bringing in another one, sacking the manager, and bringing back that other manager. That seems like it would be the wrong way to go.
If Wenger had gone back to Arsenal after Arteta had bombed, that would be some story.
That would be amazing. That would be almost as amazing. I genuinely saw some fans, like Chelsea fans, like talking about how maybe Wenger should be brought in as a caretaker manager. United fans as well. I was very confused by that. That didn't seem like a thing that I would ever see, but maybe that's just the world we live in, that suddenly Arsene Wenger is linked with Chelsea and Man United.
He's been linked with some jobs. I tell you, there was talk a while ago, just before Christmas, that in the new year he was going to be announced in a big job, and people were suspecting it could have been Bayern Munich. Of course, that never manifested itself, and Kovac is still there. But I mean, he's a manager who has got a huge amount of credibility and a huge amount of respect all over the world, and and rightly so. Did he stay on at Arsenal far too long? In my opinion, yeah, he did. But I would be interested at this stage of his career and his life, how many of his ideas would still be taken on board and how well he would do somewhere else. Look, he hasn't popped up anywhere yet. Maybe he's just enjoying his life. But I wouldn't be hugely surprised if he did pop up somewhere.
Where is there anywhere you would like to see? Again, I know you, not even from a rooting interest standpoint, but just I feel like you like, as I do, like just sort of like the weird stuff that occasionally happens. Like the idea that Sven is managing the Philippines national team is something that once a week gives me a sense of joy that I can't fully understand, and I don't know why I love it so much, but I do. So I'm wondering, where would you like to see Arsene Wenger pop up? And for that matter, where would you like to see Jose Mourinho given an opportunity next?
Well, Mourinho's a difficult one because he's got a real decision to make about what he does next. I know he's had offers. I believe he had an offer from Benfica, which he turned down. There's a huge speculation that he is just waiting for Solari to just have one too many bad results, and he's going to rock up at Real Madrid because he's still good friends with Florentino Perez. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jose Mourinho walk back into a top job at some point, which I believe will be his last roll of the dice because he's running out of places to go. As for Wenger, I'd love to see him as a sort of elder statesman at sort of Bayern Munich or Real Madrid or something like that, where he can just oversee a team of players where it's just about managing egos, because they're such a self-starting bunch. They're so good. They're so tactically astute. They're so hard-working. They just have to oversee it, and almost like an ersatz, like Carlo Ancelotti type role, where he's just a player whisperer. I'd love to see if he had what it takes to do that. But, I wouldn't be surprised to see him pop up somewhere. But knowing Wenger, I wonder if he'll take the right job and whether it'll work out for him. But I hope he does well. I wish him all the best.
And if you, Lukey, were to have somebody manage you, I know you can play a little bit. Like, who is the manager you would most like to play under if you were given the opportunity? If you could have somebody come in and manage your Sunday league team?
Probably Pep, because I think there'd be so many interesting ideas. There's a really good. Actually, you know what? Tomorrow night, not tomorrow. It's Thursday night. On the Continent are doing an evening where we show a screening of a film called "Take the Ball, Pass the Ball," which is about that great Barcelona side of 2008 to 2012 under Guardiola, based on a book written by Graham Hunter. And I've just seen the movie, a preview ahead of the night on Thursday. And some of the stuff that Guardiola comes up with is absolutely fascinating. He's like a player whisperer, but he's also like it's like he can predict the future, Mm-hmm. And so Guardiola is so influential and so good that I think I'll choose him. Sadly, when it comes to football, though, I imagine that mine and Pep's paths are destined to never cross, and that's probably exactly how it should be.
I don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he comes in and whips the Ramble into shape, keeps you on track, teaches you things you never knew, teaches you how to pivot when recording so you don't go off mic, and then suddenly you're performing at your top gear again.
Now you're talking, mate. Now you're talking.
All right, well, if that happens, we'll certainly have you back on. Even if it doesn't happen, we'll have you back on, because we always enjoy having Luke Moore on the program. But Luke, if people want to hear more about you or hear more from you, read more from you, whatever, how can they find you?
Go, just search for, if you like football, go to the Football Ramble, go to On the Continent. If you like podcasting generally, go to Radio Stakhanov, that's Stakhanov. There's loads of podcasts on that network that I run for lots of different interests. So check it out. I'm also on Twitter at Luke Aaron Moore. That's Aaron with 2 A's. And I look forward to hearing from you all, every single one of you.
And listeners, you should follow Luke, and you should message him whenever you feel like it, because Luke is a wonderful fellow. He's been on the show many times over many years, and even when he only knew my voice, he let my then fiance, now wife, stay with him in London. So I feel like Luke is that kind of accommodating person. So definitely, whenever you're in town, just stay at his house, ask if you can be there. I'm sure he'll put you up, make you breakfast, all that good stuff. So just message him whenever you're in London.
Can I just make this absolutely clear? I did let your fiancé stay at my house, but you were also there.
That's true. That's fair.
There was nothing nefarious going on. It wasn't like I was trying to sort of seduce your fiancé. You guys came as a package. I took you out for dinner. You stayed at my house, and it was all above board.
This is true. You also made us tea, which prompted you to give me the weirdest look ever when I asked, "Are you allowed to drink the water here?" Because we were coming from Istanbul in Iraq, where we did not. And you're like, "Yeah, it's a civilized country. We're good. You can drink the water." Yeah. So there you go. London, you can drink the water. Luke Moore's your friend.
I even donate my fee for this interview to charity as well, so that's kind of got
I mean, it's appreciated, especially since I'm not sure we could afford you. So, Luke Moore, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today. I very much appreciate it.
Listen, you're welcome. Pleasure.